Hi everyone, my name is Kristen Gebhardt. I'm currently enrolled in EDCI 536, and this is going to be my overview of my final instructional design project. So I'm going to do this by taking you through the actual unit itself. It's just a little bit easier to understand. I'll go to the home page. So I'm not currently teaching in a classroom. I work at Ohio State, so I decided to use a unit that I created last semester for EDCI 522. I chose this unit. I chose to do a high school level psychology unit because my undergraduate degree is in that area, so it was kind of easier for me to accumulate materials and things like that. This particular unit that I created is actually a week-long unit, and it focuses on the six major theories of lifespan development. So if you go up to the top there, all the lessons are here. There's a page for assessments, and then I have a page for the standards that I used and the technology that I used. Since I was focusing on one instructional goal for this class, I did create a different little section here that just focuses on the instructional goal that I chose to do for this class, which was, as you see here, to explain the strengths and weaknesses of each of the six major theories of lifespan development. So let me take you to this is my instructional design final report. So when I was doing the needs assessment, again, I chose this unit because I knew there were areas that could use improvement, and I chose the instructional goal of explaining the strengths and weaknesses of each of the six major theories of lifespan development, because that seemed to be the area for me that I could foresee there being a knowledge gap. When I initially designed the unit, I designed it to be kind of a hybrid unit, so what I envisioned was that students would do most of the work on their own online through the unit that I created, and then there would be one in-class meeting every week where we would kind of come together and discuss some of the more in-depth material. So for me, when I was going through the unit in the analysis phase, I really saw that there might be kind of a gap when it came to the higher parts of Bloom's taxonomy, with being able to analyze the theories and come up with strengths and weaknesses. Again, since I'm not currently teaching in a high school class, I modeled the characteristics of my course off of a friend's class. I've worked volunteered in her class before, so I'm kind of familiar with those students. So most of these students have little to no experience with formal instruction in psychology. In terms of attitudes and motivation, it's an elective course, so most students who are in it are going to be motivated to take the course unless they're just taking the course for electives for graduation, which could impact their motivation. There is a lot of technological prerequisite skills that are involved, and I'll go through those a little bit later. This particular class that I had in mind when I was doing the characteristics is a class at a public school in kind of an urban, suburban district just on the outskirts of Columbus. There weren't any students with IEPs or any other conditions that could impact their ability to learn the material, and most of the students were proficient in the English language, with I think about 3 to 5 English language learners in the course. There were between 20 and 30 students in the class, and it could range anywhere from freshmen to senior level students. Again, the purpose for this particular unit was to guide students through the 6 major theories of lifespan development and facilitate application of these theories to real-world scenarios, so you can see that here. And the instructional goal that I chose for this particular project was to explain the strengths and weaknesses of each of the 6 major theories of lifespan development. So in terms of technology, I can go back to the unit here and go to the technology page. So Screencast-O-Matic was used. This is what I'm using right now to view this video. Google Forms, which I used for this particular project to facilitate the feedback process, so the formative assessments, were all done with Google Forms. Weebly is what this entire site is hosted on, so it's a free website service. YouTube, which was used for video uploading for this particular video and for other things that were used. I used one chapter of the online lifespan development book that was available on Pearson Education's website. And then for the presentations themselves, I used Haiku Deck, Psych Bites, and ED Puzzle. I used Quizlet to get the quiz questions for many of my assessments that are in the unit. I used Poll Daddy to poll students, which I kind of use as an informal formative assessment for each of the units. And then students are required to do a PowerPoint or a Prezi presentation for this particular instructional goal, and they're also required to do a video project. So whatever technology students wanted to use for those would also be listed there in the technology area. When I did the formative assessments, I submitted all of those to the students that I identified beforehand through Facebook Messenger. That just kind of made the most sense to me in terms of using students who were not all in the Columbus area. So the way that I did that, and I'll go to that page here in my report. The way that I did that was essentially that I sent, I had already pre-identified the 3 students, and they had already agreed to fill out the survey and take a look at my unit beforehand. When my unit came to a point where it was pretty much completely done, I sent the links to each of the students through Facebook Messenger. Again, it just seemed like the easiest way to get that information out there, since not all of the students were in Columbus. I asked the students to review the units in their entireties, but I didn't require that they complete the assessments, although I did ask them to take a look at each of the assessments just to make sure that they thought that they were fair. I did ask them to test all the active links and to look through all the presentations, at least briefly, so that we could make sure that there weren't any bugs there. And then once the students got back to me and said, okay, I've completed the overall look at the unit, then I followed up with the Google Forms survey, and it had pre-made questions that were in there for them to evaluate the unit. And with a couple of the students, there were some questions and comments that they had afterwards that didn't really fit in with the survey, so we had more of an informal discussion through Facebook Messenger then. With the formative assessment with the students, really there wasn't a lot of critical feedback. The biggest thing was that they wanted there to be, I think, more interaction with the technology that I use. So while there's a lot of different technology, I can definitely see their perspective that there's not a lot of technology that requires them to really interact and engage while they're doing the different lessons. So that's one big thing I took away from the formative evaluation. And then I also did a formative assessment with an expert, and the expert that I used was the same person whose class that I had worked with before. She's been teaching for about 10 years in the Reynoldsburg School District, and her husband is an IT specialist, so she just has kind of acquired some technology knowledge over the years, and she's in the process currently of trying to infuse more technology and more tools into her classroom. So with her, I actually went to her house, I gave her the unit and let her take a look. After she was done, then I kind of walked through the unit with her, how I would have anticipated a student going through it, or how I kind of thought about it in my head as I was designing it. And then we talked about it. I did give her the survey before we had a more formal discussion and let her fill out the survey, but we did have a more informal discussion afterwards. So with the expert evaluation, I think the biggest thing that I learned was that while the navigation seems pretty clear to me, for her, it wasn't necessarily clear how to move through the unit, and I guess I could understand that. I designed the unit, so I'm coming from my perspective. So one of the biggest pieces of feedback that I think that I would use in the future would be either to devote an in-class period to going through how to navigate the unit, or to create a video, something like this, that actually tells students, this is how I expect you to go through the unit, and here are the different areas that I want you to visit. And then she also suggested that things be a little bit more interactive, similarly to the student feedback that I got. And she actually suggested adding a blog to my site, which I can do pretty easily. I think with Weebly they will allow me to host a blog on my site, so that's definitely something that I want to implement in the future. That's especially important if this is going to be an all-online unit, because it would help facilitate better collaboration between the students and between the students and the instructor. So those would be the main things that I would want to focus on in terms of redesigning the unit itself. During the ID process, I think a lot of what I did was a little bit more intentional, so I definitely appreciate that, and it did allow me, like I said, to uncover some issues. So when I was thinking about the unit in my mind, I was thinking that students would go lesson 1, they would review what the objectives and the assessments were for that class, and then review the material, and then they could go straight to the assessment and do that for all the lessons. And again, the biggest takeaway I got from that is that, you know, it would be helpful if I went through and actually explained that to students. And then again, just the basic interaction and the levels of interaction and engagement within the unit itself were really the biggest things I took away. So feel free to take a look at my unit. I'll post the link in my post, and I posted the student guides and the teacher guides as attachments along with my final instructional design report. So have fun, and thank you for your feedback.